This is part 13 of the AS and A level Java series, and in this episode we are going to be looking at the while loop. So looping is one of the key fundamental operations that you ever do in programming, because it allows you, or it gives you, the ability to repeat actions definitely or indefinitely, right? So that's very important in programming, as you shall come to realize as we progress with the tutorial. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and create a main method. And within the main method, what we can do is let us declare an integer called counter, and we'll initialize it to 0, right? So what we need to do then is to say now that we need to begin our while loop. So the while loop, it makes use of the while keyword followed by parentheses. So within the parentheses, again, you are going to have a boolean expression, that is a value that either yields a true or a false. So actually what we can do is we can come here, have something called counter, then let's have a limit of 10, right? Then what we need to do now is inside of the while parenthesis right there, we need to say while limit, or rather while counter is less than or equal to limit. What do we need to do? Then we open the body of the while loop. Then we simply need to system.out.println, and we need to print counter. Then after that, we simply need to say counter is equal to counter plus 1. That's what we gotta do. So maybe let me first run the code, and we see it in action, then I'll come back and explain what's going on. So you realize that this is the output that we get. We are getting 0, 1, all the way through to 10, right? So that's basically one of the ways you can write a program that counts from a given value, from a starting value to up to a certain value. So what we are doing in this case is that on line number 5, we are declaring two variables of type integer. We have counter and we have limit. So counter is basically the starting point, or basically the counter that we want to increment within our loop. So initially we are starting with a value of 0. Then limit is the upper limit, or the end point to which we want to count up to. So in this case, we want to limit ourselves to only 10, or we want to stop at 10. So that's why we are having that value right there. Then on line number 7, that's when we are beginning our our while loop. So we make use of the while keyword. Then within the parentheses, we put a boolean expression. So you remember that relational operators, they basically return a boolean expression of either true or false. So what we want to check is that while the counter, which is 0, is less than or equal to the limit, which is 10, we want to do all the statements that are contained within the body of the while loop. So on line number 9, what we are simply doing is we are just outputting the counter onto the screen, or down there in the console. Then after outputting that particular value, we are now coming on line 10 and incrementing that value by 1. That's what we are doing right there, right? So initially, on the first run, counter is 0, limit is 10. So it's checking if 0 is less than or equal to 10. So this is going to be true. So if it is true, it's now going to execute these statements, which are contained within the body of the while loop. So it's going to print counter, which is 0, right? Then after outputting the value of 0, it's now going to take 0 and add 1 to it, now such that counter is now 1. Then it goes back to line 7 and checks if 1 is less than or equal to 10, right? Then it's going to output the value of counter, which is 1, right? Then after that, it's going to say 1 plus 1, which is now 2. Then it goes back. So basically, it's looping through, right, until this expression evaluates to false, and that's when it's going to stop. All right, so just to run the code one more time, maybe let's change the starting position from 1. Maybe you wanted to count all the numbers from 1 to 100, right? You can actually do that. So if you click on run, you realize that you get all the numbers starting from 1 up all the way to 100, is it? So that's how you implement a while loop in Java. So in the next episode, we'll be looking at the for loop, which basically gives us the same principle of iterating or repeating an action, but we are going to see how it has more control over unlike the while loop, is it? But basically, what you can do with the while loop, you can also do with the for loop and vice versa. That's important. But before I end the video, one more thing that I need to point out is that whenever you are creating a while loop, you need to be careful not to create an infinite loop. An infinite loop is a loop that executes without end. So maybe let me say I forgot to increment the counter right here, right? And for some reason I just ran the code without having that line. I want you to notice that I've basically created an infinite loop. So I'm getting a string of 1s all the way, and it's not ending as it happens right now. So I know that there's no way for me to show you that it's actually just printing a series of 1s right now. But if I were to press Ctrl+C on the keyboard to try and interrupt the program, you'd realize that it's actually running. So you need to be very careful about that. If you do not increment, if you do not include a step counter, or if you do not increment your counter when you make use of a while loop, you create something that's called an infinite loop. That is a loop that executes without end. So you should be careful about that. So I think that's just about it for this tutorial. I'll see you in the next one.